Beyond the light, my journey through death and return. I was rushed to the hospital, and that's when I left all the agony behind. I left the chaos of the emergency room and entered a whole new realm. This would become my near-death experience. I have no fear of death now. I believe the soul is too powerful an entity to simply cease existing. Yes, the body stops and decays, but the soul continues into the next realm.
Let's learn about another near-death experience story. Take advantage and subscribe to our channel.
Before my near-death experience, I was living in Chicago. I'd moved there hoping to turn my life around because I wasn't in a great place. I'd left school with minimal qualifications and was struggling to find steady work. I thought moving to a big city might create more opportunities, but it didn't fulfill my dreams. In fact, the struggle intensified because Chicago was such a competitive place to live. I picked up whatever work I could find: manual labor on construction sites, washing dishes in restaurants, anything that would pay the bills. That's how I lived day to day. Eventually, I ran out of work because, honestly, I wasn't particularly skilled at construction. Money became tight, and I started drinking heavily, partly because of the environment I was working in. This certainly didn't help my financial situation. Things got so bad that I was about to be evicted from my apartment. Life couldn't have gotten much worse. I went to stay with my sister and her family in Milwaukee for a couple of weeks, just to escape my troubles. While there, I was seeing off a friend at the train station who had come up from Chicago. As I helped her onto the train with her bags, I stepped back after giving her a goodbye hug. That's when my coat got caught in the automatically closing doors. I couldn't pull it free. I called out for a conductor, but there wasn't one on that particular route. I banged on the windows and tried pressing the emergency buttons on the doors, but nothing worked. Everything was locked down. The train began to rev its engines, and I looked into my friend's eyes. I saw absolute terror reflected there, and I thought, this is it. I'm going to die. I was staring death in the face for the first time in my life, and it was terrifying. The train started to edge out of the station, then picked up speed, changing gears one after another. I lost my footing and was dragged along the platform edge before being pulled between the platform and the speeding train. I went under the wheels. It was violent and terrifying, like being thrown into a huge mechanical beast, dark, oily, fast, and frightening. I tried to hang on, determined not to let this thing beat me or take me. I had a strong will to live, and I did survive. I kept my face pressed into the gravel. I was rushed to the hospital, and that's when I left all the pain behind. I left the drama of the emergency room and entered a completely new realm. My near-death experience. It felt like a transition, and I immediately sensed that I was dead. I didn't fight it or try to resist. After everything I'd been through, the struggles in my life and the horror of the accident, I just went with it because I instantly felt safe. I was greeted by pulsating colors all around me: ambers, greens, yellows, and reds. They calmed me down. I tried to lift myself off the hospital gurney to look around, to see where I was, and realized I was no longer on that gurney. Looking down at my hands, I found myself laid out on a huge rock, like an enormous granite slab that resembled a medieval altar. Despite how that sounds, it felt very comfortable to rest on. I also noticed I was no longer clothed, but covered in a blue silky sheet, which also brought me comfort. I closed my eyes and relaxed. Then I saw a very bright light beginning to shine through my eyelids. When I opened my eyes and looked up, there were 3 symmetrical grids of white light slowly converging toward me. The light was so intense that normally the human eye couldn't withstand it, but in this realm, I could. I kept looking into this light because I knew it was more than just light. It was a healing energy, a healing force covering my entire body. I laid back again, closed my eyes, and just bathed in this energy of healing light. Then I felt someone's presence near me. I lifted my head and opened my eyes again, and just at my feet was this person, an androgynous being emanating light from within, with pure white blonde hair and a simple black contemporary t-shirt. Nothing as ethereal as you might expect. I said, "Wait, I know you. I know your face." but I couldn't place from where. I asked aloud, "Where do I know you from?" This person just smiled knowingly. I trusted this being and felt they were there to guard and guide me to where I might go next. I laid back with complete faith in this person. A little later, I sensed more presences. On either side of me were two female forms. The one on my right wore a very simple brown dress and had long brown hair, while the one on my left wore a beautiful traditional white outfit. She appeared to be of Native American, Brazilian, or perhaps South Asian descent, and her dress was traditional and beautiful. Their hands hovered over my body without actually touching it. The energy coming from their hands was incredibly powerful, causing every molecule of my body to vibrate with unconditional love. I felt they weren't only healing the physical injuries from my accident and the shock of what had happened. They were healing years of emotional hurt that we all carry with us, the baggage as we call it. They were removing those layers of baggage, getting down to the pure essence of my soul. It was a liberating feeling, unlike anything I'd ever experienced, and it felt wonderful. I had complete faith in what was happening. Then I started thinking about my family. They had been so distressed. My mother had been in tears, and it was all very difficult for them. I thought, if I'm dead now, they're going to be devastated. I was worried about them, so I tried to edge over and look down over the side of the rock I was lying on, hoping to see them. I couldn't see my family, but what I did see was even more amazing. A huge waterfall of stars, like a massive arc of stars, comparable to Niagara Falls or Victoria Falls. But instead of billions of tons of water cascading over the edge, it was millions of stars flying over, shooting stars sparkling in an awe-inspiring display. As I looked deeper into this waterfall of stars, my eyes began to focus, and I could see from one galaxy to another. I was looking down into infinity. I started to see nebulae forming, colors and beautiful formations. I thought, wow, I'm not in a small, darkened space as I initially thought. I'm in the universe itself. I felt very aware of being part of the universe, and that was a powerful moment, feeling that connection. I felt more connected to this new realm, this heavenly state, than to Earth. I didn't explicitly think I'm in the universe, but it felt like the universe was surrounding me because I was enveloped by these beautiful formations of stars and nebulae. I was aware of feeling that energetic pull, that energy source within me. I laid my head back, and the final part of my experience, perhaps the most profound, began. As I looked through the stars throughout the universe, I suddenly saw a tunnel of white light coming toward me. I felt it before I even saw it, an energy that seemed to shake my entire body, my whole being. I wondered what was happening as this beautiful tunnel of white light came closer and closer. It was vast, with flames slowly circulating all around it. Normally, I would have been terrified by something like this because I didn't know what it was, but somehow I knew what I was looking at. I was being told this was the source of all creation. This was God, not the traditional image of God with the long beard as depicted in religious art, but God in the form of this beautiful white light. This white light was an energy of unconditional love, and I felt it completely encompass me. I describe it as being ultra-real because that's exactly what it was. And then suddenly, I was thrown back into my body. I was back in the hospital. All the pain came rushing back, and the beautiful light was gone, replaced by fluorescent strip lighting. I was wheeled into surgery for an 8-hour operation. Afterward, in my hospital room, I was trying to process what had happened to me, not just physically and mentally absorbing the fact that I'd been under a train, which was enormous to deal with, but also this incredible experience I'd had. I knew nothing about near-death experiences back then. I was scared about how I would tell everyone about this, but it was buried deep within me and needed to come out. I decided to paint what I'd seen, even though I had no formal training. When I started that very first painting, I was apprehensive, wondering how I would capture the experience. But once I began, it was like I was receiving a crash course in how to do it. I don't know where the knowledge came from, but I was being guided on how to blend colors to create skin tones, light, and all the other elements. It came together so well that it amazed me. I knew that once I started painting, and with the other pieces that followed, I was still somehow connected to the energy of that other realm, and I was being helped to bring this vision to reality. I work with music now too, and I use both mediums to share my story. I definitely feel I'm being guided. I call it channeling when it happens. I recognize those moments when they come, and it's a beautiful feeling. It's almost as if my conscious mind stops thinking, and I become fully present. When I step back and look at what I've created, I think, wow, that looks amazing. Where did that come from? I always say, thank you so much, because it's a process that continues to amaze me. I have no fear of death now. I believe the soul is too powerful an entity to simply stop existing. Yes, the physical body stops, decays, and ceases to function, but the soul continues into the next realm. One lesson I learned in that realm was that time didn't exist there. I realized that I'd spent my entire life up until that point too focused on time, thinking about the past and all the mistakes I'd made, opportunities I'd missed, and worrying about the future, what would happen to me because I was broke, and where my life was heading. I never really stopped to live in the present moment. I realized most of us don't actually live in the moment, but the present moment is the most important part for all of us. That's a guidepost for me, and I think it's valuable for everyone. Nathan's near-death experience. I was completely paralyzed. I was blind. I was burning and on fire. Then something extraordinary happened. As I started to enter this crystal city, the being that was with me merged with me. Although it may have been my higher consciousness, I don't know for certain, but I found myself alone in front of 13 beings. The being in the upper right would designate one of these entities, and that being would begin to shimmer. My name is Nathan Brooks, and before my near-death experience, I was just a typical tough guy, a bully, sports enthusiast, fist fighter, former Marine with that hardened military mindset. I didn't care about spiritual matters or these kinds of conversations. I grew up in the Deep South, where the prevailing belief was that everyone was going to hell, so I already knew what was supposedly waiting for me, according to that religious perspective. I had no interest in any of this, until the day I was struck by lightning while talking on the telephone. In that moment, I discovered I was a spiritual being with absolutely nowhere to go and no way to escape this fundamental truth. Not only was I a spiritual being, but I had chosen and was chosen to be here at this particular time. And as if that wasn't enough to process, I was dead. I was completely paralyzed. I was blind. I was burning and on fire because the electrocution had damaged my nerve endings. These sensations happened simultaneously. I had to grow up quickly, learn to walk again, regain basic bodily functions, and transition from feeling invincible to being utterly helpless. The doctors never gave me more than 6 months to live because of the internal damage. What happens when you leave your body is this. You experience what's called the life review. Your entire existence passes before you in a 360-degree panorama. You miss nothing. Everything you've ever seen or done is there. First, you watch from a second-person perspective, as if you're your own best friend. Then, remarkably, you literally become every person you've ever encountered and feel the direct results of your interactions with them. For me, most of these experiences involved feeling the pain, anguish, suffering, and brutality that my actions had created. There were some good moments too, but I primarily confronted the harm I had caused. Through this experience, I came to understand that we live in a world with real structure and parameters. It's not some vague concept. There are responsibilities and intentional actions that define our existence. The world operates through energetic patterns, and it is fundamentally fair and just. No one gets away with anything, ever. That's why forgiveness is so powerful. When you forgive, You step out of the line of fire and allow the divine system to work while you're no longer standing between yourself and the other person. After my life review, I had a guide with me. As I approached what looked like a crystal city, imagine driving into Denver at night, seeing all those houses illuminated on the mountainsides with a light fog creating a beautiful scene. The being who was with me somehow merged with me. I can't explain it any other way. Suddenly I found myself alone before 13 beings, 12 directly in front of me and another to my upper right. The being in the upper right would designate one of the 12, who would then begin to shimmer until all I could see was their silvery outline surrounded by pastel colors: red, orange, blue, green, gold, violet. This being would send what looked like a box toward me, similar to a laptop, though that's just the closest comparison I can make. I would enter this box and experience an event. Unlike the peaceful place I'd been in before, these experiences engaged all my senses. I could smell burning flesh, see decay, observe buildings and plant life. I was physically present in these scenarios before returning to the beings of light. I went through 12 of these boxes, and the being of light explained, if humanity continues on its current path, the aftermath of wars and conflicts, these are the probable possibilities of what will occur. I documented these visions after spending 2 years learning to walk and feed myself again. These were never my prophecies. They came from the beings of light showing me possible futures. What I witnessed included events like major nuclear accidents, climate changes, and a pandemic that I described in remarkable detail, all recorded years before they occurred. The most profound truth I learned is that no one ever truly dies. Anyone who tells you otherwise is either misinformed, deliberately misleading you, or has fallen for institutional constructs, religious or governmental, that represent the ultimate illusion. Do I believe in reincarnation? I had no direct experience with it during my NDEs, but yes, I believe in it because I've seen the multiple possibilities that exist. Once you reach the other side, it's like being handed options about what you could do next. Think about it this way. Imagine being in heaven and someone approaches with an opportunity. How would you like to hold and hug someone? They ask. We don't hug here, we communicate differently. How would you like to feel someone separate from you? How would you like to co-create like God, to create life where love and physical connection combine to create a vessel that a divine spiritual being can enter? When you're in heaven, that sounds fascinating. I get to practice being like a creator. I get to see myself from a distance. I get to physically experience love. Why not? This is how it works. It's not dreary or frightening. We are playful, wonderful, caring beings. I always say, you are a powerful, mighty spiritual being with dignity, direction, and purpose. The only thing that can ever go wrong is when you allow something to affect your dignity, which skews your direction and purpose. And the greatest thing that impacts people's dignity is their opinion of themselves based on religious, institutional, and governmental rules, not their divine self. After being struck by lightning, I needed brain surgery. Later, I required open-heart surgery and was resuscitated after the procedure. 3 days later, I went into cardiac arrest and was resuscitated 2 more times. Beyond my own experiences, I've been a hospice volunteer for 47 years. I've been with over 2,000 people transitioning from this world to the next. I've been present as 358 people took their final breath. I've studied what we call death for over 5 decades, so I know what I'm talking about when I say, you will never die. It's never going to happen. Consider this. 95% of people who've had near-death experiences report lifting out of their bodies and observing themselves from above, seeing their physical form on a bed, in a car wreck, or wherever they were. If you lift out of your body and see your body, that means you are not your body. That's the profound revelation that near-death experiences bring. You're not going to die, but you will transition. You'll lift out of your body, acclimate to the world you're leaving, and begin to perceive the new system of dynamics affecting your non-physical self. Almost everyone who has had an NDE reports this. I'm sharing these truths because over the next few years, death and its causes will become increasingly visible. The systems that have co-created our current experience, pharmaceutical companies, food processing corporations, agricultural conglomerates, will be brought into the light. The fear of death and the belief that your physical body represents your true self are fundamental misconceptions. Millions of us have returned from NDEs with no agenda, proving categorically that conventional views on death are incorrect. Everyone has an out-of-body experience when they transition because you never truly die and you are not your physical body. Everything built upon the premise that your body is your true self, other than caring for it properly, is a trap designed to make you believe that's who you are. This creates a control mechanism. Heaven or hell, reward or punishment. But that's nonsense to a spiritual being, though many people accept it. In all my journeys to the other side, apart from facing myself in the life review, I never experienced anything hellish. I've studied accounts of hellish NDEs, which represent about 3% of cases. But I can tell you this. There is no hellish experience I've ever heard described that comes anywhere close to the profound confrontation of facing my true self and my motives. Today, I'm working on creating centers where people can understand 3 absolute truths. You will never die, you are not your physical body, and you are an energetic being. Many people are grieving, experiencing PTSD, or contemplating suicide, because the world is changing rapidly. But these 3 fundamental truths can shift consciousness. I predicted years ago that the battle for humanity's soul would be fought in healthcare. I've dedicated my life to hospice and end-of-life care because I can be most effective there, the most caring and understanding. I've been exactly where dying people are going 4 times, and I've been to the other side. A hospice volunteer faces themselves and their fears. So many people talk about spiritual truths, but caregivers, hospice volunteers, and medical assistants truly know the difference. I'm not afraid of death, which makes me a comforting presence for those facing transition. Before they lift out of their body, have their life review, and return to where they came from, I can be there for them. When they transition, they'll be celebrated. Everyone they've ever loved, and everyone who has loved them, will be there to welcome them. This physical existence is just a job. We all come here because it's a job, but we get distracted because the system is designed to distract us, to make us think we'll die, to threaten us with suffering if we don't follow certain rules. As death becomes more prevalent through pandemics and wars, look at where we are now and what may come. What can one person do? Take action. Use your voice. I do this regularly. I'm not afraid of anyone. It's terrifying, yes, but we're spiritual beings. We take action. We don't just complain. We didn't come here to be afraid. We came to be brave and discover how to make a difference. Remember, if you're here now, you're part of the team bringing light. You've come to help birth a new age that's unfolding around us. I care deeply about the world my children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will inherit. I want them to be brave, to know they won't die, to understand they're not just their physical bodies, and to recognize their spiritual nature. The meaning of life? We wanted to experience breathing. We wanted to hug someone, to physically feel our love instead of just being our love. We came here to practice being creators, to experience separation and reunion, to grow through challenges. Whenever someone sees this message, I hope they'll take action. We remember who we truly are. We live with awareness of our spiritual nature. And we never forget, no one ever truly dies. Mark's near-death experience. They called a code, and they came running in. I was above my body. I could see them doing chest compressions. I could see all the nurses around me. The nurse got scared and ran out of the room, and before she left, she said, "She's killed him." I'll never forget that moment because I felt her emotions while I was standing above my body. Then came a time when the person next to me said it was time to go. We left and went to the most beautiful place imaginable. To describe it wouldn't do it justice, because it was that beautiful. My name is Mark Wilson. Before my experience, I was primarily focused on financial success. When I sat with my 2 brothers, Our goal was to become millionaires by age 32. To achieve that, we were willing to do whatever it took. After my experience, I realized life isn't all about money. It's about how you treat people. I traveled frequently for business, often away from home 3 to 4 weeks at a time because, again, it was all about money. One time when I came home, I decided to go skiing during the Christmas holiday rather than spending time with family. I called a friend, and we went skiing at Pine Peak in Utah. It was a beautiful day with fresh powder. There's nothing like it. Around 11 in the morning, I was standing in the lift line, bragging about our skills, how we made our turns, how we handled the jumps and moguls. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a young woman coming down with her ski poles, flailing in all directions. She crashed into us in the lift line. We helped her up and didn't think much about it for the rest of the day. I continued skiing until about 4:30 when we returned to the car. My friend Ryan was an EMT by profession. As I removed my ski gloves, left one first, then right, I discovered my thumb was hanging straight down to my wrist and my fingers were swelling. That's when I realized the earlier accident was more serious than I thought. Ryan said, "I can't fix that with a band-aid." We made it to the hospital and my wife met us there. Everything was going smoothly. They were ready for me. They wheeled me down the hallway, but I didn't even tell my wife I loved her or my children. The anesthesiologist was called away on another emergency, but the doctor said it wouldn't be a problem, since he'd done this nerve block procedure before. They had me lie on the table and placed a sheet between me and my arm so I couldn't see the operation. They used a tourniquet to raise my arm, closing 2 valves before lowering the arm and injecting a local anesthetic. About 15-20 minutes in, I started feeling pressure in my arm, and the doctor instructed the nurse to release one of the valves, standard procedure to reduce pressure. A while later, the pressure built up again. The nurse was supposed to close the first valve and then open the second, but she mistakenly opened the second valve without closing the first. I felt the medication travel up my arm, across my chest, and into my heart. The next thing I knew, I was being lifted out of my body. I was standing above, watching the operation. It was an odd feeling as I moved down the table and first recognized it was me lying there. I wondered why I was lying there when I was standing here. My main concern was the doctor continuing to operate on me. I could clearly see all the instruments on the table lined up precisely. Then I looked at the heart monitor. It was flatlined with no activity. The nurse panicked and ran out of the room saying, "She's killed him." I'll never forget that because, while standing above my body, I felt her emotions about what had happened. When she left, several others rushed in to try reviving me, but the doctor kept working diligently. Then I realized someone was standing next to me. I don't know who it was. I couldn't see them clearly, but they were positioned at an angle where I couldn't quite make them out. They communicated with me through my mind. I kept glancing back at my body, wondering why it looked so lifeless. Then my companion said it was time to go. We left and entered the most beautiful place imaginable. Words can't do it justice. I was standing in a field with tall grass up to my waist. This wasn't ordinary grass. It had long strands that were green at the bottom with golden tips. Remarkably, the grass flowed toward me, though there was no wind. It was as if each individual strand had its own soul and generated its own energy. Very unique, unlike anything I'd experienced before. To my left were wildflowers of all different colors, and again every flower faced toward me, every leaf oriented in my direction. I felt the love and energy emanating from them. I saw colors I can't even describe. Beyond the 6 colors we normally perceive, there seemed to be at least 10, including colors I have no words for. Just left of the flowers were tall trees with the most brilliantly colored leaves imaginable. I looked around at my surroundings and noticed it was like a panoramic view. I could see far to my left and right. My guide still stood beside me, but instructed me through my mind not to look back. It was very clear I wasn't supposed to look back, and I understood I wasn't returning because of what they said. In front of me were 3 different shapes of clouds. one large one in the middle with two smaller ones on the sides. Beyond the clouds was the most brilliant blue sky I'd ever seen. There was still no wind, yet everything seemed to flow, with the grass and flowers all moving toward me. After taking in my surroundings, I noticed my guide had vanished. Thinking about it over the years since, you might expect to feel anxious about being alone, but I didn't feel that at all. It was as if love was flowing toward me from everything around me. It was so peaceful that I didn't want to leave. I'd never felt anything like it before. Then something profound happened. I experienced a review of my life. I've heard others describe life reviews, and I completely understand what they went through, because you don't just watch it like a movie, you live through it. You experience every emotion from the day you were born until the present. I began by seeing myself being placed on my mother's stomach at birth, being given life to enter this world. What affected me most was seeing how I'd hurt people. When you're pursuing money and status, you often do whatever it takes to get ahead. I played professional basketball in Europe, and I always wanted to be just a little better than the next person, because sometimes that's all you needed to advance to the next level. I became skilled at this, and it transferred into my business life. What I didn't realize until this life review was how others felt when I did something unethical to get ahead. During this review, you might expect to feel guilty, stepped on, or disciplined, but it wasn't like that at all. For me, it was a learning experience. I needed to learn how to treat people better. I noticed I didn't see any of my material possessions around me, no fancy homes, boats, cars, or other possessions. The only thing I saw was how I treated people. And this has been one of the most profound learning experiences of my life, understanding how others feel about what I say to them and learning to listen, because everyone's journey is completely different. After reviewing my life, I accepted it. There was no one to argue with, no way to explain why I did what I did. I simply accepted it. After contemplating this for a few minutes, I realized everything in the review was presented with love. I could have been harshly judged for my actions, but instead, it felt like someone reaching out to teach me how I should have been living. I took full accountability for everything. It was all presented in black and white, right and wrong, with no gray area in between. After this, while standing in the field, a voice came from the cloud saying, "Start walking forward." As I did, I noticed rays of light emerging from behind the clouds, reaching toward me as if to pull me closer. At the same time, the flowers and grass seemed to follow me, as if pushing me toward the cloud. It was the most unusual sensation, energy I'd never felt before. I wasn't floating but walking, yet I felt simultaneously pushed and pulled, like being embraced from all directions. In my childhood home, no one expressed love verbally. I grew up in a Boston family and spent much of my time on the streets, so I never experienced that kind of love before. But it felt incredibly good, so good that I would have accepted anything offered to me. As I approached the cloud, an arm extended through it. Just an arm, not a full person. It emerged from the upper part of the cloud down to about waist level. I had time to study this arm. It was strong and muscular, larger than mine despite my own substantial size at 6'3" and 270 pounds. The hand was positioned with palms together in a beautiful, welcoming gesture, not a handshake, but more like reaching out to receive me. I didn't notice any skin color in the arm or hand. It wasn't white, black, or any earthly tone. It was the most beautiful, pure color I cannot adequately describe. I came within inches of taking that hand and entering the cloud. I felt energy at levels I'd never experienced before. I was so close to grasping that hand, and I knew if I did, I'd never return. But then the arm withdrew. I tried to reach for it again, but a voice from the cloud said clearly in my mind, "It's not yet your time. You have work yet to do." The next thing I knew, I was back in my body, lying on the operating table with a sheet over my head and a document on my chest stating I'd been dead for 20 minutes. A death certificate had been prepared. I threw off the sheet, startling the doctor and nurses who were wheeling me out. As we passed the waiting room, my wife was sitting there unaware of what had happened. The doctor rushed over to her saying, "He's okay, everything went well, we brought him back." My wife and I experienced completely different perspectives of the event. She felt fear, wondering what she would do with 3 kids if her husband died. I experienced something beautiful, and honestly, I didn't want to come back. For 3 days afterward, I felt total peace. All I hope for in the next life is that I can do a little better than what I saw in my review. Life is a learning process. After my experience, I realized there is definitely life after death. When I stood at that cloud, I could sense people on the other side waiting for me, though I don't know if they would have cheered me or what their reaction might have been. I hope next time I might be cheered for what I've done with my life. I also believe that if there's an afterlife, there must have been a before life as well. It's a feeling rather than something I can prove, but I believe we came from somewhere. We're here now to learn, and we'll continue to another life in an ongoing learning process. The interesting part is that as humans, we tend to fall back into old patterns. About 10 years after my experience, I was golfing with a friend when we were both struck by lightning. You don't usually meet many people who've been hit by lightning and survive. It affected my friend severely. It damaged his back, requiring multiple surgeries. Strangely, I walked away relatively unharmed. I didn't walk away thinking, "Ha, I survived lightning." Instead, I thought, okay, I get it now. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 experiences for someone to learn from their mistakes and get back on track. I'm now 70 years old and still learning. I know someday I might not survive one of these incidents, but I hope when that time comes, I'll have a better report than I did before. Wherever you are right now, you have the ability to make changes and move forward. I hope everyone who reads this book or sees this video realizes it doesn't matter where you are in life. You can change. Something as simple as a smile might transform someone's day. I'm not perfect at it, but I'm learning. When we decided to share this story, we established a foundation called the Wilson Foundation. While I can't say all proceeds go there because there are expenses involved in publishing books and making films, we're directing significant funds to this foundation to help children with special needs. We've realized this doesn't just affect the children, but their entire families, so we're trying to bring a little light into their lives. I want to share this with everyone because we've found more fulfillment through the foundation than through anything else in our lives. James's near-death experience flatlined. The nurse got scared and ran from the room. And before leaving, she said, "She's killed him." I'll never forget that moment because I could feel her emotions while I was standing above my body. Eventually, my guide said it was time to go. We left and went to the most beautiful place imaginable. To describe it wouldn't do it justice because it was that beautiful. During my life review, I realized I needed to learn how to treat people better. When you experience something like this, you have to process it, which is why it took me over 40 years to share my story. Until then, my focus had been on money. My brothers and I had set a goal to become millionaires by age 32. And when you commit to that, you'll do whatever it takes to succeed. After my experience, I realized life isn't just about money, it's about how you treat others. I was away from home frequently, sometimes 3 to 4 weeks at a time, because money was my priority. I was quite selfish. Once I returned home just before Christmas after being gone for weeks, and instead of spending time with family, I decided to go skiing with a friend in Park City, Utah. It was a perfect day with fresh powder. There's nothing quite like it. Around 11 a.m., I was standing in the lift line bragging about our skills, our turns, jumps, and how we handled the moguls. Suddenly, I noticed a young woman skiing down completely out of control, her poles flailing. She crashed into our group in the lift line. We helped her up and thought nothing more about it. I continued skiing all day. When we returned to the car around 4:30 p.m., my friend Tyler, who worked as an EMT, watched as I removed my gloves. I took off my left glove first, then my right, and discovered my thumb was hanging down to my wrist, while my fingers were swelling significantly. I realized the earlier collision had caused more damage than I'd thought. Tyler said, "I can't fix that with a Band-Aid." We drove to the hospital where my wife met us. Everything seemed to be going smoothly. They were prepared for my arrival. As they wheeled me down the hallway, I didn't even think to tell my wife I loved her or mention our children. I was taken into the operating room, where the anesthesiologist had been called away for another emergency. The doctor assured everyone it wasn't a problem, since he'd performed nerve blocks before. They had me lie on the table with a sheet between me and my arm, so I couldn't see the operation. They applied a tourniquet, closing 2 valves to raise the arm, then lowered it to inject a local anesthetic. About 15 minutes later, I began feeling intense pressure, so the doctor instructed the nurse to release 1 valve, standard procedure to relieve pressure. Shortly after, the pressure built again. The nurse was supposed to close the first valve before opening the second, but she mistakenly opened the second without closing the first. I felt the medication travel up my arm, across my chest, and directly into my heart. Suddenly, I was being lifted out of my body. I found myself standing above, watching the operation. It was disorienting at first. I looked down the table and recognized myself lying there, wondering why I was in 2 places at once. My main concern was watching the doctor operate. I could clearly see all the instruments lined up on the table. Then I noticed the heart monitor showing a flat line, no activity whatsoever. The nurse panicked, ran toward the door and exclaimed, "She's killed him," before leaving the room. I'll never forget that moment because while standing above my body, I could feel her emotions about what had happened. Several other staff rushed in to attempt resuscitation, but interestingly, the doctor remained focused on his work. Then I became aware of someone standing beside me. I couldn't clearly identify who it was. They stood at an angle where I couldn't quite see them, but they communicated with me through thoughts rather than words. I kept looking at my body, noticing how lifeless it appeared. After a while, my guide indicated it was time to leave. We departed, and I found myself in the most beautiful place imaginable. Words cannot adequately describe it. I stood in a field with tall grass reaching my waist. This wasn't ordinary grass. Each blade was green at the bottom with golden tips. Remarkably, all the grass flowed toward me despite there being no wind. It was as if each strand possessed its own consciousness and generated its own energy, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. To my left were wildflowers in various colors, and like the grass, every flower faced toward me. I felt love and energy radiating from them. I perceived colors beyond our normal spectrum, not just the usual colors we recognize, but perhaps 10 different hues, including some I have no words to describe. Just left of the flowers stood tall trees with the most vibrant leaves imaginable. I surveyed my surroundings, noticing I could see great distances in all directions. My guide remained beside me but clearly instructed me not to look backward. This directive was unmistakable. I shouldn't look back, and I understood I wouldn't be returning to my earthly life. Before me were 3 distinct cloud formations, one larger cloud in the center with 2 smaller ones flanking it. Beyond these clouds stretched the most brilliant blue sky I'd ever seen. Though there was no wind, everything seemed to flow with its own energy, all directed toward me. After taking in this scene, I noticed my guide had disappeared. Reflecting on this over the decades since, you might expect I would have felt anxious being alone, but I experienced the opposite. Love seemed to flow toward me from everything in this environment. The peace was so profound that I didn't want to leave. I'd never felt anything like it. Then came my life review, something many near-death experiences report. This wasn't watching my life play out on a screen. I relived every emotion from birth to present. The review began with seeing myself as a newborn being placed on my mother's abdomen, receiving life. What affected me most was witnessing how I'd hurt others. In pursuit of wealth and status, I'd often taken unethical actions without considering their impact. What I hadn't realized until this review was how deeply these actions affected others. Surprisingly, this review didn't induce guilt or shame. It offered a learning opportunity about treating people better. I noticed none of my material possessions appeared. No homes, vehicles, or status symbols. The only thing that mattered was how I'd treated others. After the review concluded, I simply accepted everything without argument or explanation. There was no one to debate with. I had done these things, and I acknowledged them. After contemplation, I realized the entire experience was presented with love rather than judgment. Everything appeared in clear terms of right and wrong, with no ambiguity. While standing in this field, a voice from the cloud directed me to walk forward. As I did, rays of light extended from behind the clouds toward me, seeming to pull me closer. Simultaneously, the flowers and grass appeared to follow me, as if gently pushing me toward the cloud. This created a unique sensation of being both pulled and pushed by loving energy. Growing up in my childhood home, expressions of love were rare. Coming from a family in Pittsburgh and spending much time on the streets, I hadn't experienced this type of unconditional love before. It felt incredibly good, so fulfilling that I would have embraced anything offered to me. As I approached the cloud, an arm extended through it, just an arm, not a complete person. It emerged from the upper portion of the cloud downward. I could study this arm closely. It was powerfully built, more muscular than mine despite my substantial 6'3", 270-pound frame. The hand was positioned with palms together in a welcoming gesture rather than extended for a handshake. Most remarkably, this arm and hand had no discernible skin color, not white, black, or any earthly tone, but a pure color beyond description. I came within inches of taking that hand and entering the cloud. The energy I felt was beyond anything I'd ever experienced. I was certain that if I grasped that hand, I would never return to earthly life. But then, the arm withdrew. I reached for it again, but a voice from within the cloud clearly communicated, "It's not yet your time. You have work yet to do." The next moment I was back in my body on the operating table. A sheet covered my face, and a document on my chest stated I'd been dead for 20 minutes. A death certificate had been prepared. I pushed the sheet off, startling the medical staff who were wheeling me out. As we passed through the waiting area, my wife sat there unaware of what had transpired. The doctor hurried to her saying, "He's okay, everything went well, we brought him back." My wife and I experienced completely different perspectives of this event. She felt fear about potentially losing her husband and facing life alone with our children. Meanwhile, I had experienced something so beautiful that I didn't want to return. For 3 days afterward, I felt complete peace. My hope for the next life is that I can do better than what I witnessed in my review. Life is a learning process, and I'm certain now there is life after death. When I stood before that cloud, I sensed presences waiting for me on the other side, though I don't know what reception I might have received. I hope next time I might be welcomed for what I've accomplished. I also believe that if there's an afterlife, there must have been a before life as well. This isn't something I can prove, but I feel certain we came from somewhere, are here now to learn, and will continue to another phase in an ongoing developmental process. The challenge is that as humans, we tend to revert to old patterns. About 10 years after this experience, I was golfing with a friend when we were both struck by lightning. It's rare to meet someone who has survived such an event. The lightning severely injured my friend, requiring multiple back surgeries, but strangely, I walked away relatively unharmed. I didn't view this as a miraculous escape, but as another reminder. Sometimes it takes multiple experiences for us to truly learn our lessons and redirect our lives. I'm now 70 years old and still learning. I know someday I might not survive one of these incidents, but I hope when that time comes, I'll have a better report than before. Wherever you are in life right now, you have the ability to change and grow. I hope everyone who encounters this story realizes that regardless of your current circumstances, positive change is possible. Something as simple as a smile might transform someone's day. I'm not perfect at this, but I'm continuously learning. When we decided to share this story publicly, we established a foundation to help children with special needs. We've discovered that supporting these children affects entire families, and we're committed to bringing light into their lives. This foundation has brought us greater fulfillment than anything else we've experienced.